Hey there, it's Chris Calcutt here, Calc, from the Focusrite group, and of course as part of Focusrite group we have the wonderful Sequential synthesizers as one of the brands that we look after. And here I am with GAC today down in Brighton, and I've got the fantastic Trigon-6 Trigon-6 Desktop for this one. The Trigon-6 is a really, really lovely instrument. It's based around VCOs and a VCF, so voltage controlled, pure analog sound throughout. And it follows on from the other 6 voices from Sequential as well. So we have the Prophet 6, the OB6, and then the Trigon-6 as well. There are some differences really with the Trigon-6 between the Prophet 6 and the OB6. In fact, they're all really quite different, but there's some really interesting things that we've got that we can explore here on the Trigon. So I'm just going to play a few chords here. I'm just on the main preset. It's got that really, really rich, creamy analog sound. Now, one of the things about the Trigon-6 is that we have 3 oscillators. On the Prophet 6 and the OB6 we have 2 oscillators, but on the Trigon-6 we've expanded that out to 3. And we've also got quite a different style filter. In fact, they're all different style filters again in the 6 voice, but in this one we've actually got a ladder filter. And this is the sort of filter that you could find on essentially something like a Mini Moog or something like that, but in this it's a polyphonic instrument and it's got this really rich analog filter in there. So let's explore the synth and the architecture and what we've got going on. And the first thing I'm going to do, like every good synthesist should, is take us to a basic initialized patch. So preset right takes us to a single sawtooth sound. We can see here in our middle section the oscillators, and here I'm listening to oscillator 1. So we have a volume control for that, so we can balance the oscillators, but you'll see here we've got this switch. Now this is quite an interesting way of working. So we have 3 wave shapes here, and we can have just 1 of them, or 2 of them, or 3 of them. So we can tap out from the oscillator all 3 different waveforms. So the waveforms we've got are a triangle, we've got a sawtooth, and we've got a square or pulse control. When we're into pulse, of course, then we've got our pulse width control here. So we can use that to affect a change in the sound, and of course we can do some interesting modulations to that as well. Over here I've got an LFO section, so perhaps if I want to add a little bit of LFO to the pulse width, we can just dial that in here, give a bit of speed, and then maybe a bit more. And you can hear that now controlling the pulse width control of the oscillator 1. Now, of course, as I say, we've got 3 oscillators here. So let's bring in oscillator 2. We'll bring this in on a triangle. And maybe I change the octave on this one. I really like the fact that we've got the octave control on this switch here. I think that's a really nice touch. We've got a fine pitch control as well. And if we want to change the pitch to be more of an interval, we can maybe set it to the same note. Then bring the pitch up. And we get a full fifth on this fine pitch control. Maybe we'll bring in the third oscillator now. We'll put that in on a sawtooth wave. Bring the volume up. So that's a really big, beefy sound already, and we're just listening to these raw oscillators at the minute. We've got a square, a triangle, and a ramp or sawtooth shape there, various different kind of pitches. We've also got a noise source here as well. So that's a really handy thing to have. And then perhaps we'll get into the kind of a bit of the secret sauce of the oscillators here as well. Well, I say sort of the oscillators, this is actually connected to the filter. So on this particular pot here, we've got a drive control. If I turn it clockwise, to give it a nice bit of burn, but if I bring it back now, what we'll get is filter feedback. Now you can hear that's a really gnarly sound. Basically what we're taking is the output from the filter and feeding it back into the filter, and that feedback has been tuned to give us this really nice kind of subharmonic kind of flavour. Now let's have a listen to the filter. We've got a big signal here with a lot to bite onto, so maybe let's just take it down to the sawtooth. We'll keep it on oscillator 3 for the minute. You can hear the cut off there. It's a 24 dB per octave filter. Got a nice quite wide range there. And then if we bring in the resonance as well, you can hear that nice chewy kind of filter sound with the extra resonance there added. Now, as with all ladder filters, as you increase the resonance, that is going to take a bit of the bottom end out of the sound. So if I now bring in the feedback control, we can add that in again. And now we're getting this really big filter sound. Now here we've got a bit more control over the filter as well, because we've got an envelope amount and a dedicated envelope there as well. So let's just add a bit of envelope amount to it. Maybe just make a quick envelope shape there. So here with that filter feedback, it's going to do some really interesting things when we're changing the pitches. Bring that back in again. And you can hear those extra harmonics, but that's a real secret weapon, I think, of the Trigon-6. Well, moving on into this section, of course, we've got two envelopes here. We have a dedicated envelope for the filter, and we've also got an amp envelope here as well. Let's go back to an initialized patch, and we've got the controls here, so bit of release on there. Again, with the filter there, we can add a bit of filter envelope to that as well, just to get a nice bit of flavour in there. So I've got a nice bit of control here. So we've got the two modulation controls here, but then over here we've got our LFO as well. So let's just take the envelope amount off the filter, drop the filter down a little bit, and put the LFO directly onto the filter. Now we've got different shapes here for the LFO, so we've got this nice triangle shape here as well. So that's doing a nice thing, but if we move to a sawtooth, we can go for full amount, drop the speed down, we can also reverse saw this as well. And then we have a square wave. And then a lot of fun here with a random as well. And random is, of course, just using a noise source to basically sample and hold for the LFO to give us a nice random control. Let's drop the amount back a touch. And you can hear that moving in the filter. So that's the LFO section. Now there's another part to a lot of sequential instruments, certainly on all the 6 voice ones. We've got an interesting thing called Polymod. It's Polymod on the Prophet 6, it's called Crossmod or Xmod on the OB6, but back to the name Polymod here on the Trigon-6. Let's go back to an initialized patch again, and what we'll do now is we'll we'll go to triangle waves, and I'm going to turn on all three. Just bring the volumes down, so we're just listening to one. And here, the Polymod takes oscillator 3 here, or the filter envelope, and can apply it to several destinations. This is where things get quite interesting. So if I take oscillator 3 amount and I attach that to the filter, oscillator 1 frequency, you can hear basically we've got FM happening here. So if I play around with the pitch control as well, and of course what I could do is attach an LFO to the pitch of oscillator 3 here and just have a play around with that. So we get some pretty cranky sounds with that. If I increase the octave here on oscillator 3, you can get some really interesting FM-y style sounds with this Polymod. And of course this is polyphonic as well. And this is quite interesting. So for example, if I drop this right down to the low control, this means effectively the oscillator is not running at oscillator speeds, but at very low controlling speeds. We'll attach it to frequency 1, the frequency of oscillator 1, and I'm going to switch it to a square wave now. Now you can hear that now this low frequency oscillator from oscillator 3 is basically switching the pitch of that sound. But it's a polyphonic instrument, polyphonic cross modulation. So if I bring in a different note at a different sort of speed or time, if I go the octave high, sounds like a whole load of telephones going off in the call centre, but the point is you can hear how we've got these different speeds running because it's polyphonic. And that's also because we've got this attached to the keyboard control. But if I take that off now, we now have, let's get that speed up a bit. And now the others will stay in time, but they will be out of phase, meaning I can start them at different points. So you can get some quite interesting different sounds using it that way. We'll just take a quick look at the effects that we've got on here as well now. Let's switch back to a nice preset. So this is obviously the first preset, the initial preset. And now we'll bring in some effects. So we'll switch the effects on here, and we've got 2 effect slots available to us, and I can switch between them with this switch here. And here at the minute we're just listening to the delays, but we've got, let's see, we've got different delays here: chorus, phaser 1, 2, 3, a ring modulation, 2 flanges as well there. So we've got, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different effects on effect slot 1, switch to effect slot 2, and now we've got the same 9, but then in addition to that we've got some reverbs as well, another 4 reverbs there. So quite a bit of scope for the effects that we've got. So let's just get a bit of hall reverb on that one. I always like that one. So So we've got this nice control, and then of course we've got different parameters that we can control and play around with. So reverb size, maybe we could go back to this one and add a bit of bucket brigade delay to that as well. So just get a bit more to it and maybe tighten up the timing. So we'll go to 8th notes, increase the feedback. So a lot of scope there for playing around with the effects that we've got. This ties in nicely, I always think, with the sequencer. The sequencer on sequential instruments are always really, really nice to work with. Very straightforward and easy. So I'm just going to hit the record button, and now I'm just going to play in a few notes. And of course it's a polyphonic sequencer as well, so. I can also add extra rests and ties in there as well. Okay, and now we hit play. And this gives us a lot of scope to free our hands to be able to play the sounds. Now, while the sequence is running, I can also use the vintage knob, and we can hear quite a bit of difference happening to the sound there. The vintage knob is basically doing some quite interesting electronics changing. It's changing the tuning of the oscillators a little bit, the tuning of the envelope, so they're just having different behaviors, and it's really sort of dialing it back in time into kind of the old sort of 70s, 80s analog electronics kind of style. So vintage is a really nice way to sort of take this modern, even though it's an analog voltage controlled oscillator, voltage controlled filter synthesizer, it's taking this analog synth and pushing it back in time so it sounds even more analog. And yeah, we'll just have a quick final listen now to the pan spread as well. So if I just start that off. So headphones recommended for this bit, but basically pan spread is pushing out the voices to the left and right and just giving us that nice kind of spread. So that's a good look at the Trigon-6. You know, we've taken a good look at the oscillators. We've got 3 oscillators here. We've got our great sounding ladder filter with this wonderful feedback control, the ability to have all the different wave shapes that we want, and we can really go to town with it. One last little trick I'll show you is we'll just go back to an initialized patch. Pretty boring sawtooth there, but let's just bring in all of the waveforms that we have. Let's bring all the volume up. So we've got all of that in there now, and now if we go to the unison mode, we can turn on unison. So by pressing this, we have a single voice unison. What does that mean? Well, I can't play chords anymore, but we're just listening to one of the voices, but we have 6 to play with. So if I press and hold the unison switch, tap through now, and we'll put it to, well, let's try 3 voices initially. Big sound, but if we go to all 6, we've now got 9 oscillator sounds, shapes, and we've now got 6 voices playing monophonically, which is an enormous sound. And then if we dial in the pan spread, it's a big sound, and again bring in the vintage. Really big sound. Anyway, that was a good look at the Trigon-6, a wonderful 6-voice analog synthesizer from Sequential. As I said earlier, with the 3 oscillators, with the ladder filter, this amazing feedback control, with really nice harmonically dialed in tones. We've got the Polymod as well, the ability to be able to control various aspects of the synthesizer with that. We've also got an aftertouch section here as well. If we've got aftertouch keyboard, we can basically assign it aftertouch to several different places, including the effects mixes as well, which is really nice. We've got our great sequencer, of course. We've got our LFO control and all the good things you'd expect to see on a sequential synth. If you're interested in checking the Trigon out, I'd thoroughly recommend it. This is the sort of thing that you really need to hear. And if you're in Brighton, pop down to the store here in Brighton, to the GAC store, or alternatively check them out online and you'll be able to find out more details about the Trigon-6 there. But this is one of those sorts of instruments where you really have to have a good listen to it to appreciate how great it actually sounds. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. I hope this has been interesting, and see you again.